Hello and welcome to this Chalkbeat Ideas event. Thank you all for making time for this important conversation. And there's a lot of you. I'm excited to see so many parents, teachers, educators, education professionals here. I'm Matt Barnum, and I'm Chalkbeat's Ideas editor. At Chalkbeat Ideas, which is a new section here, we're focused on the big questions and big debates shaping American education. And right now, perhaps the biggest question on many people's minds is the future of the U.S. Department of Education. We've got exactly the right people here to talk about this. Joining me is my colleague, Erica Meltzer, Chalkbeat's national editor, who has been covering this issue for the last year. I'm also pleased to have Dr. Lindsey Burke with us. Dr. Burke is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Programs at the Education Department. Before that, she spent 17 years at the Heritage Foundation, where most recently she directed the Center for Education Policy there. Lindsey, thank you for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Just a few logistical notes before we start. Our conversation is going to be about 40 minutes long. The first 30 minutes will be questions from Erica and me. The last 10 minutes will be set aside for audience questions. If you are an audience member who has a question, you can put it in the Q&A chat below. Those should be questions that end in a question mark, not comments. Um, Audience members can also upvote questions they want asked. We'll also be drawing from pre-submitted audience questions. We'll get to as many as we can. Okay, let's dive in. Lindsey, let me start by asking you this very basic question. Why is the Trump administration trying so hard to eliminate the U.S. Education Department?
Well, thanks again, Matt, for having me. And as you know, to your point, back in March, the president signed Executive Order 14242 to return education to the states. And so this has been a very clear-cut mission for the administration and for this agency. That as a result of that executive order, this would be our final mission to wind down what Ronald Reagan famously called Carter's bureaucratic boondoggle. And I think that that really stands the test of time. That conception of the department, unfortunately, as a bureaucratic boondoggle that has not led to the types of outcomes that we would all have hoped to have seen over the past 45 plus years. And everybody on this call knows the stats. Student proficiency is not where anybody would like it to be in terms of math or reading achievement. A third of students are proficient in reading. We're not internationally competitive. We have not seen achievement gaps narrow to the extent that everyone would like to see them narrow. And I think at the end of the day, we just have not gotten the type of return on investment for taxpayers that we owe them. We have spent trillions of dollars since this agency was signed into law in 1979 and went into operation in 1980, and kids can't read or do math. So the executive order, the whole idea behind this EO is to finally situate dollars and decision making closer to the student that those dollars affect so that families at the end of the day can have more control in their children's education and so that we can actually, in the areas where it makes the most sense, achieve some efficiencies as well for taxpayers and for grantees. And so, I think that's the spirit of the order. It is education a quintessentially state and local issue. It is simply not a federal prerogative. And so downsizing this agency and returning education to the states really, I think, achieves a longstanding goal to empower families and local communities.
Thanks for that, Lindsey. I want to talk about the performance question, and there are different, you know the data. There are different ways of cutting the data, but I want to focus on the long-term trends, the 13-year-old math
Sure.
data, which is one of the longest running tests. In 1978, the scores, 13-year-old math scores were at 264 scale points. By 2012, that had increased to 285. And so between 1978, right before the department was created, to 2012, they had gained 20 points, which is quite large. Now, there have been declines recently, and we've been writing about them, you know about them, but I'm not sure how you connect that to the education department if there had been, multiple decades of gains, which I'm not saying were caused by the department, but can you speak to that comment and more broadly, how will moving different pieces of the department to different agencies help improve those scores?
Yeah. Well, to something that you alluded to a second ago, that we can't necessarily say that was because of the department
Yep.
proper, right? So there's a lot that happened over that 4 decade period, right? We saw standards-based accountability put into place, really, which started in earnest in the 80s. And when, of course, throughout the 90s, we saw things like No Child Left Behind, where there was more of a focus on, as you know, meeting AYP, right? That every student would be proficient in math and reading by the year 2013, 14. Now, of course, that didn't happen. There was not a single state on track to universal student proficiency. But either way, just to play NCLB devil's advocate a bit, there was a renewed focus on academic outcomes. And so all of that happened, of course, while the department was around. But to your point, that's not to say that that could not have happened or could not have happened even better in more appropriate federal agencies. So to the second part of your question, what we're doing right now, where we are partnering with other federal agencies like the Department of Labor, where we believe programs like career and technical education, for example, will be better housed, where we can integrate with not only our experts here at the department, but the experts at the Department of Labor who think about workforce preparation every single day to better integrate these programs and expertise. That could have happened without a Department of Ed, right? All of the laws that were in place that one could argue have led to some of those academic outcomes. All of that could have happened without a standalone cabinet level agency. And so that is part of the theory of change that we're working under as well. And I would say, just on that point, because inevitably it comes up, protections in federal law, many of the ones that immediately come to mind that are critical, right? Civil rights protections, protections for students with disabilities, all of these predated the creation of the Department of Education, and all of those would remain in full force and will remain in full force as we partner with other federal agencies.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Um, are you planning to move oversight of special education services to Health and Human Services or perhaps to some other federal agency?
Right. So we are still evaluating the future of things like special education programs, programs for students with disabilities. So we're still thinking about where those are best situated. But, as we have said, I think time and time again, when it comes to all of the partnerships that we're engaged in, these statutorily mandated federal functions, such as special education services, such as civil rights enforcement, they will not go away in any shape or form as we return education to the states. And, like I said a second ago, all of these protections did predate the creation of the Department of Ed as a standalone federal agency. But we do not have an answer yet, have not landed on a decision about what exactly the future of special education looks like. As soon as we know, we will, of course, be working with all of our stakeholders in the community to think through next steps there.
Is there something that makes this area more challenging than some of the other areas where you were pretty quick to move them to other departments?
Well, I think with all of these, we want to get as much stakeholder input as we possibly can. And, I do think that that's particularly important for students with disabilities and their families. And so we really want to be intentional about what that engagement looks like and do as much of that as possible. In the coming months and years. And so, it is, and I think I mentioned OCTAE, our Office of Career Technical and Adult Education earlier. I think that to your point, there are areas like OCTAE where it is very clear that there is and has long been a partnership between our two federal agencies. So the Department of Labor is very much involved in the day-to-day of career and technical ed. And so that integration with what is a smaller entity within the Department of Ed made sense to move first. That's something that we have been working on for quite a few months and have really great relationships at the Department of Labor there. And so for all of these partnerships, we are being intentional. We want to establish the partnership with the receiving agency first. And honestly, it's a matter of getting to know the people over at the receiving agency. We've built some really great relationships with labor now, and so we're continuing that in other areas.
There's a proposal in Project 2025, and for our audience who's not familiar with the background, when you were at Heritage, you were the lead author of the education chapter. There's a proposal there to essentially turn IDEA into an education savings account for parents, and you estimated that that would generate about $1,800 for each child. Would that still be your ideal outcome? And how do you think that would benefit families when it's kind of a modest amount of money, depending on what the kids
Sure.
need?
Sure. So, I mean, look, on the work that predated my arrival at the department, I mean, I've written on many ed policy areas over the years, and that's not something that we are currently contemplating here at the agency. And of course, anything like that is something that would have to go through Congress. So, yeah, it's I think, a question for Congress long term. But, I think broadly speaking, we do want more options for families. We want families to be able to choose learning environments that are the right fit for that children for that child. And I think that that applies no matter what a family situation is, to be able to choose safe and effective schools that align with what they need for their children.
No, I think that would make sense to a lot of people. Do you think the money goes as far when it's given to an individual family versus the work that, say, a school system could do?
Sure. Well, look, I mean, I think on the broader choice question, right? So
Mhm.
set aside just the IDA component. I mean, certainly at the state level, right? If we look at state level programs where you have large scale universal ESAs or vouchers or tax credit scholarships, we are talking about more like 10, 12. In the case of students with disabilities, sometimes $20,000 per child per year going into their education savings account that they can then use for services and schools and products and providers that are the right fit for them. So at the state level, with these programs that are moving so rapidly now, which I think is a really welcome development, we are seeing a significant amount of money, enough to cover for many students full tuition. We've also seen at the same time the new federal tax credit scholarship program at the federal level that, of course, was signed into law as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill and the Working Families Tax Cut Act. And so we're seeing states now indicate whether or not, and we're seeing a lot of indication that they will opt into that program as well. And for that particular program with the federal tax credit scholarship, even though it's a $1,700 credit for the donor, you will have scholarship granting organizations in the state that end up providing scholarships that are worth $7,000 or $10,000, and so they'll be able to design that. And so, I think again, and if you look at just last thing I would say on that, in the states for choice programs, some of the most rapidly growing choice options were for students with disabilities, and so I anticipate a lot of interest among those families as well.
You mentioned Congress. At what point do
Yeah.
some of these pretty big changes that you're making in the
Yeah.
department, at what point do either the organizational changes or the spending changes have to go to Congress?
Yeah, yeah. So, and I should say, I don't know, just to kind of level set, and probably the audience, if they're tuned into this, knows what has transpired over the past few months. But just in case somebody's just tuning in to what's been happening here, we have signed 6 interagency agreements, actually 7, one that is now fully implemented with our Office of Career Technical and Adult Ed. So those CTE programs having been partnered with the Department of Labor on. But we signed 6 right after that, our Office of Elementary and Secondary Education Programs. Those we've entered into a partnership to procure the services of the Department of Labor to manage those programs. None of those program dollars or staff have been detailed yet over to labor, but that agreement was signed back in September, I believe. Our Office of Post-Secondary Education Programs. So these are our higher ed programs that are grants. So no student loans and grants, but the institution-based grants. We signed an IAA with the Department of Labor as well on that. Our Indian education programs, which is pretty exciting to work on. We're about to enter into tribal consultation on that. But our Indian education programs, we've partnered with the Department of Labor to co-manage those programs with Ed. We also did with Interior. We also did 2 IAAs with the Department of Health and Human Services. One C Campus, the College Access Means Parents and Schools program, and then foreign medical accreditation. So we've entered into a partnership with HHS for both of those. And then finally, we signed an IAA with the Department of State for our international and foreign language education program. So all of those partnerships have been signed. They really are, to your question on Congress, we hope proofs of concept that we are offering up to Congress to show, to demonstrate that in partnering with these agencies, all of these programs are not only in good hands, but probably better hands. I think I would argue with the Department of Labor in particular, as we've seen with Octave, which again has been fully implemented. So we hope Congress sees these as proofs of concept, because ultimately, to your point, Erica, at the end of the day, Congress does have to codify this. And so we're hoping they look at what has transpired so far and sees that it's been effective for families and grantees.
And so this is sort of this will show evidence. When will you go back to Congress? Have you made any concrete progress talking to people, getting them on board? And what will people see that will say, yes, this is working?
Well, I won't get ahead of our Office of Legislation and Congressional Affairs, but we certainly have many conversations with our friends on the Hill about all of our work, about what this could look like moving forward. But again, we have offered up, I think, so far with Octave, a really strong proof of concept. We are providing what is an integrated grants management system. And I'll just say on that, the Department of Education is the only federal agency that uses a particular grant system known as G5. There's no other federal agency that uses this. And so we are really aligning how we get money out the door to grantees with what every other entity in this town uses by moving from G5 to these other grants management and payment systems. And so we're providing these integrated management and payment systems for grantees. We're achieving efficiencies there. For grantees not only have to use one system for accessing grant funds across programs. State education and workforce agencies will be able to use the same grant systems for their Perkins and WIOA money. So these are the types of proofs of concept points that we're hoping really demonstrate the efficacy of this overall effort. The Department of Ed and the Department of Labor, we are planning to use the Department of Labor's regional infrastructure to really sort of harmonize site visits. And so that's another area where we think things have been streamlined. And then we've moved the WIOA portal to the Department of Labor. We've aligned submission dates for WIOA and Perkins state plans in hopes that more states will submit combined plans. So there are just a lot of areas where we think we are achieving efficiencies for the grantees and ultimately the folks on the ground. And so if you look at Octave, we have since October 1st, since we entered into that partnership, gotten over 1,300 grants out the door, over $500 million. 39 states have drawn down both Perkins and WIOA, which is consistent with normal patterns. So all of that to say, Labor's doing a phenomenal job. And again, we think this is a proof of concept that these programs can be better stewarded at more appropriate receiving agencies.
Thank you for that, Lindsey.
Lindsey, let me turn to a different topic. A related topic in a way. The Department of Education under this administration has actually taken a number of actions seeking to overrule local and state decision making. I'll name a couple. The administrations have sought to overrule and invalidate a gender-neutral bathroom at a Denver high school, Chicago's Black Student Success Initiative, New York State's ban on Native American mascots. There are other examples like that. Now, whatever you think of those policies, how are all those actions consistent with the promise to send education back to states and localities?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the Secretary has prioritized enforcing civil rights across the country. Those instances that you listed are good examples of that. And this is, I would say, entirely consistent with our overall effort to return education to the states. As long as this agency exists, we need to be sure that we are enforcing the law. And so we can walk and chew gum at the same time and continue to make sure that we are safeguarding the rights of students across the country while also simultaneously working to streamline and downsize this agency. And so as long as we're here, we will be doing that. And then as we move forward and continue to partner with other federal agencies, again, those protections will remain in full force.
Let's shake things up a little bit with a lightning round, which I hope
That's your way of saying I'm talking too long, which was really polite. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pre-planned lightning round.
Uh-huh.
So I'm hoping short answers for this. If you need to elaborate, obviously I can't stop you. So can you name any Democrats in the Senate who support eliminating the education department? I ask that because they would probably
Sure.
be needed to overcome a filibuster.
Well, look, I would say it is early on. I don't want to get ahead of our Office of Legislative and Congressional Affairs, so won't name names. But we, again, are really hopeful that showing this proof of concept will win folks from across the aisle over to this idea.
So in the lightning round, can you name any?
Again, we have only
Okay,
started
sure.
conversations. So,
Okay,
I mean, I couldn't give you a list
sure.
of ours at the moment, right? I mean, that's not the point that we're
Okay.
at right now. Of course, historically, we know where folks have landed on this. But again, I think as people see this proof of concept move forward, we will get support from both sides of the aisle.
Okay. Still in the lightning round. Should the feds be spending more, less, or about the same on IDEA?
Well, look, I think this is a priority of the administrations to make sure that we are supporting students with disabilities. And of course, to look, I mean, fully funding IDEA has been of interest to many people at both sides of the aisle over the decades. And so I think that, again, we don't want to get ahead of any sort of budget negotiations that are out there right now or conversations that are happening. But certainly fully supporting IDEA, the money that is the current levels that are out there now, and potentially additional support moving forward. So there is no world in which anybody's talking about any reductions in support for IDEA.
Do you consider charter schools to be public or private schools?
Well, they're public schools,
Okay.
certainly. I mean, these are, yeah, that's their charter, right? I mean, you can have private management organizations running a public charter school, but they are fundamentally public.
Do you think there should be federally required annual testing as there is now?
So I would say that the current law, I can only speak to the current law. The current law on the books is that states do have to do annual testing in grades 3 through 8,
Would
right?
you like to
Yeah.
change that? The question is, in your ideal world, would you like to see that changed?
Look, we want to give states flexibility, and I won't take a position one way or the other in this current role as to what that should look like because we want to see states submit state plans, give us their best ideas for how they can strengthen accountability at the state level.
Um, should has has the Department of Education made any efforts to restrict children who are unauthorized immigrants from receiving a publicly funded K-12 education?
No,
Okay. Um, in your ideal world, would Title I be phased out?
no.
Okay.
Again, speaking, this is on behalf of the department. What our priority is right now is making sure that these grants are serving families well. We do not have any conversations right now around what funding levels might look like moving forward. What we are thinking through is how we can make sure that grantees and parents and students can best leverage that money is going out the door smoothly and seamlessly and that it's actually meeting its stated purpose, which is to improve outcomes for students across the country. And in too many instances over the past 4 decades, in the wake of the creation of this agency, that's simply not been happening. And so the spirit of these partnerships that we're entering into with IAAs is to actually improve the lives of kids across the country, improve academic outcomes, improve academic attainment, improve the taxpayer experience, improve the grantee experience. And so, I think moving forward, levels of funding, I mean, all of that is something that will ultimately be up to Congress. What we are doing is thinking about how we can best streamline those dollars and improve the experience of people on the ground.
Thank you. This summer, the administration froze roughly $7 billion to school districts during a critical time period at the start of the school year. Should we expect additional funding freezes going forward?
I have no reason to anticipate anything at the moment. So, no.
Does the education department control those decisions?
Look, I mean, we have lots of conversations with all of the federal entities that are involved. There are a lot of decision points that are a part of that ultimate decision.
Secretary McMahon has said repeatedly that the administration is not interested in cutting education spending, and I think we've heard that from you as well. And during her confirmation hearing, she said Americans should not be concerned that federal funding is going to be removed from their schools, but how they get that federal funding may change.
Right.
Why do we see this administration trying to cut spending, whether it's in these funding freezes or whether it's in the budget proposal, which has some pretty substantial cuts?
Well, look, I mean, we certainly, I obviously, what the secretary said is absolutely correct, right? I mean, we want to maintain a great user experience for students, and we're more interested in making sure that dollars go out the door well, and that who controls those dollars matter more many times than the amount of the money that's going out the door. Having said that, there are lots of opportunities, and we have taken them to make sure that this agency is not engaged in wasteful spending. We're not on autopilot anymore. We are actually reviewing every single grant that goes out the door. There are, I mentioned EIFEL earlier, Office of Foreign Language and Adult Education. We had EIFEL grants, many EIFEL grants that were going toward things that are completely out of step with the administration's priorities. Supporting students to travel to Colombia to assess systemic conditions of anti-trans violence. I mean, the list goes on and on. There were so many grants that were more or less in that category. So we've terminated hundreds of grants in excess of $2 billion that are no longer funding these fads and in some cases insidious ideologies. And so it's not only the grant money, but it really is looking from top to bottom here at the department about areas where there could be wasteful spending. We canceled a fitness center contract that included personal training that was $277,000 when nobody was here during COVID. We have closed the Department of Education's health clinic. Now, you might at first glance think, well, that sounds like not a great idea, but good luck if you need it getting actual medical care from the health clinic here at the Department of Ed, because it was only open from 11 to 1 during the day. They provided 267 total services in 2024 at a cost of $1,400 per service. They had just 60 total patients, not even 267 patients, 60 patients that got multiple services. So basically, all you could get was a Band-Aid and maybe have your temperature taken. And so, this is a savings of $424,000 as a result of that. So we really are looking top to bottom to find where there are areas that we can cut wasteful spending. But, of course, chief among all of those is making sure that we are reviewing grants that are going out the door so that they are serving the interest of American taxpayers and families.
Thank you for that. I think we're going to do one more question and then switch to the audience questions. And I think there's a couple in there that might potentially be a follow-up to that. What is the plan for the Institute for Education Sciences, which for those who are not familiar is the research arm of the Education Department, and the administration has proposed to re-envision that work?
Yes. So similar with some other entities that came up earlier, we have not yet spelled out what that will be for IES moving forward. I will say that we have been thinking about this question intently here over the past year. IES really is, I would argue, just the gem in the crown of the Department of Ed. It is, if you go all the way back to the late 1800s when the Department of Ed was created for a year, right before it got demoted to a little Office of Education, it was a statistics gathering agency. And I do think that that's an important function of the department. And of course, as with everything, where it ultimately lives is an open question. But right now, that's not a question that we have answered.
Are you going to be publicly releasing the recommendations that Amber Northern put together?
Still having conversations around that. But under review.
Thank you.
But and just a quick follow-up on that. Have you seen those recommendations?
Have I seen them? Yes.
Okay, that they have been made. Okay. Can you give a brief summary of those recommendations?
I don't think we're ready to quite yet, but I will just say, Matt, that it is she's put a lot of thought into that effort. And so when I say IES is something that has been looked at for the past year here, I really mean that. I mean, this is, Amber has done just a great job at really thinking through the nitty-gritty of what that looks like moving forward. Yeah.
Okay, right on time. We're going to transition to some audience questions, and I'm going to do a couple from the live audience that were the most upvoted that people want asked. So this one is from Krista, who asked, how does closing the education department help districts and states when it will require them to liaise with multiple federal agencies with different contracts, technologies instead of a singular entity focused just on education?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Thank you for the question. So I think this idea that programs are not already siloed is one that is a bit of a misnomer, a bit of a myth. So it really is, I think, a myth to think that the Department of Ed has been this sort of one-stop shop for SEAs and LEAs. Over the years, states and districts go to ag for child nutrition, and labor for WIOA and adult ed. Head Start is at HHS, international education programs like Fulbright, right? Medicaid reimbursements over at HHS. So, it's sort of this urban legend that the Department of Education has been a one-stop shop. So we are, as a part of this partnership, in a service of returning it to the states, but as we're partnering with other agencies, we do think, and I articulated this with Octave, that we are going to create a lot of efficiencies and a streamlined experience for the grantees who will only, in some cases, have to apply through one federal agency. And last thing I'll say on that, you know, some of our partner agencies really are just more in tune with the local community, right? I mentioned Head Start. There's a Head Start office in every congressional district in this country, right? Students are in Head Start across the country. And so HHS is really on the ground with that. Labor has unemployment offices everywhere across the country. They're on the ground. Interior has incredibly close relationships with tribal communities. And so that is all part of this theory of change overall.
The next question I have is from Mark Lieberman, who's an Education Week reporter. He asks, the department has canceled hundreds of ongoing grant awards during the first year of this administration, including for projects supporting priorities like charter schools, special education, parent engagement, and more. Most of the cancellations cite DEI language from grantees' applications that they were required to include. How does canceling hundreds of millions of dollars of grants and previously awarded funds for ongoing projects support the administration's goals?
Yes. So great question, Mark. Thank you for that. Again, like I said at the top, we're not on autopilot. We are reviewing every single grant. On this question of having been required in previous administrations, there were lots of grantees that did not do that as part of their application process. They did not end up including DEI or other related issues in their grant applications as things changed back and forth politically. And so those grantees, conversely, would have been penalized under the prior administration. So we are using those dollars to reinvest in better projects that are really serving students better than the initial grants that were serving the I would say adults in the system better than they were serving the students. So again, not on autopilot. We are reviewing everything. I mentioned $2 billion earlier in this. And of course, for many applicants, they do have the opportunity to reapply in some cases with some grants and can do so.
Okay, this was a pre-submitted audience question, so props to those who pre-submitted ones. Are responsibilities of the education department as responsibilities of the education department get passed on to other departments, what resources like staff and budget are being passed along to support the growing responsibilities of labor and other departments?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. And I should have said this at the beginning. I mean, the way that the IAs work, if it's not clear, is that staff at the Department of Ed are experts in a given program area or grant. Those staff are detailed to the receiving agency. And so there's no expertise that's lost. They're simply, instead of sitting here in their chair at 400 Maryland Avenue, they're sitting in a chair over at the Department of Labor 0.5 miles away. We can see it from the window here. So we're not losing expertise. Those folks are simply getting detailed over. And then just to give you an example from the grantee level, for grantees, for example, with our Octave programs, they are literally emailing the same email address that they did before with Ed. They have the same points of contact that they had prior to those people being detailed over. And so, again, as I said before, we're hoping that this is seamless. So far for Octave, it has been seamless. And we think that as we move forward, others will play out similarly.
Erica, you can go ahead with the next questions.
Thank you. So this question comes from Jolene. If this administration decides to pursue a school choice ESA approach to funding special education, how would you address the fact that private schools are not required and often don't have sufficient incentives to provide intensive individualized support to students with disabilities?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jolene. Again, as I mentioned before, it's not something that we have under consideration here at the agency. That would be a question for Congress, but I haven't heard anything on that front.
And from this question comes from Brendan. Some states students perform better on tests than other states, and states already have a lot of discretion in delivering education. Specifically, what is it about returning education to the states that would improve student outcomes, especially in those states that are lagging further behind?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So, I think over the years, the argument has been correctly that the amount of regulations and red tape that are promulgated on states and local leaders from this agency far exceeds the amount of money and the financing share that the federal government has, right? I mean, everybody knows this. We're at about 8.59% of K-12 funding comes from the federal government, from the federal taxpayer. And yet the rules and regulations and red tape really exceed that 9% financing share. And so, it's, I think at the end of the day, a matter of really making sure that, every dollar is as close to the classroom as possible, right? Every time we remove regulations, that's more money that is ultimately making its way down to the classroom. And so moving away from this top-down approach. And, we're seeing so much innovation in the states right now, and that's coming from the states, of course, not the federal government. Look, I mean, I think one of the best examples is Louisiana. Louisiana coupled with Mississippi. I mean, both of those states, Mississippi in particular, right? I'm sure you've done sessions on the Mississippi Miracle. I mean, that's happened because of state level initiatives and good leadership at the state level, not because of federal mandates. And so, I think the more that we can return education to the states, the more we encourage competition at the state level, the more we'll see improved outcomes.
Um, I'm going to go back to a pre-submitted question, and then if we have time, we'll sneak in one more audience live question. This person wondered about the rationale for shifting K-12 programs to the Department of Labor and writes, arguably schools have broader purposes, civic, moral, and social, rather than just preparation for employment. Can you speak to some of these broader purposes of education and how they might be safeguarded?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. That education really is about forming human souls, right? And about really preparing individuals, preparing students to inherit the blessings and liberties of a free society. And so, sometimes it does sound a little like a blunt instrument to say, we're partnering with labor to prepare for the workforce. But fundamentally, right, as a matter of grantee dollars and federal involvement, we have to make sure that the flow of dollars at the federal level is supporting a strong American workforce and that we are investing in a way that ensures that students do graduate prepared for college or to enter a career or to enter the military or to be entrepreneurs, right? We have to get kids ready to become future adults, which at the end of the day is what education is all about. And so we firmly believe that this partnership with labor that we have signed for our Office of Elementary and Secondary Education is smart and will make sure that those dollars are serving those end purposes. And sorry, one other quick thing. I would also add the secretary has several supplemental priorities. And so you can look back at those. We've got priorities on literacy and other areas, but she has been incredibly invested, for example, in things like America 250. She's touring every single state as a part of that in the order in which they were admitted into the union. And so this focus on civics is one that is near and dear, I know, to her heart and the administration's.
Thank you. If you can answer this in 1 minute, what is the Department of Education doing to address the growing backlog of civil rights complaints with the closure of so many regional offices, and what kind of complaints are being prioritized?
I think I can answer that in 20 seconds. So this backlog is not a new phenomenon. Unfortunately, it's been around for decades. It really grew during the Biden years. And so, since January 20th, we have opened investigations and resolved many hundreds of disability-related discrimination cases, for example. The Trump administration's OCR has made really historic progress in making sure that we're protecting American students. It's evidenced by our multiple higher education deals over the past few months, protecting women's sports, et cetera. So, as we evaluate what the future of OCR looks like, where it would best be managed, we'll continue to vigorously uphold all anti-discrimination protections, et cetera. But that backlog has been a problem that was not the creation of this administration. It predated our arrival.
Thank you for that answer. I think I would be remiss if I didn't say that there's been a lot of reporting that there is concern that some of these cases are being closed without full investigation. That is all the time we have. We really do appreciate Lindsey taking the time to meet with us and answer our questions. This is obviously a period of enormous change, and we really appreciate hearing from someone who's so closely involved in the decision-making that's going to shape education going forward. You can follow our ongoing coverage at chalkbeat.org or by subscribing to our newsletters. And as the event closes out, there's going to be a short survey that will pop up. If you can take a few minutes to let us know what you thought and what questions you still have, we would really appreciate it. And thank you again to Lindsey for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.